Alright, I'm gonna do a quick like build update for 0.3 for the Chaos.ed Contagion Lich build with basically the stuff we know so far, which is honestly not a ton because we don't really have the full gem info, we don't have the new passive tree updates, but there are some things we know that are gonna change the build, and I've tried to compile as much of it as I could. So um kind of just got this POB with has my current character imported into it. And I set up a passive tree for 0.3 version, but we don't have that yet. I set up a skill version for 0.3, which I did change some gems around to kind of cover the fact that uh, you can use multiple copies of gems. And then there's a gear thing, but that's not being used. But mostly it's just this little bit right here, which I'm just going to kind of cover these notes real quick and kind of explain them. Which is essentially the changes from 0.2 to 0.3 for this build. And then once I cover all these, I will also just quickly go over the basics of the build as it stands currently for anybody who's not familiar with it, just to kind of give you the primer on just like a quick mini guide of how it functions and how it levels and all that, because that's kind of the best we can do at the moment. um so Dark Effigy quality got nerfed. Currently Dark Effigy's quality bonus gives you 20% chance, I think it is, to wither on hit at max quality, which is really good. It just makes you instantly pretty much stack wither up super fast. I thought maybe I was gonna have to find some other way to get Wither, but we already do run Withering Presence on the build, and it turns out with the extra duration and all that we have total, I tested this. You can actually get to max Wither stacks just from Withering Presence, so that should be not a problem. It'll just take a little bit longer to stack up, but not the end of the world. Also, the one of the Chaos Wand bases, the one that gives Chaos Bolt skill, that's also going to be able to apply some stacks of Wither, so you might just have a wand with that as your base. And then you could hit it a couple times at the start of like a boss fight to initially build those stacks up faster, and then your Withering Presence will just maintain it for you. Early on, it'll be a little bit harder. Well, not really super early on because you wouldn't have quality, but like probably mid-map progression, where maybe you might be missing some duration scaling for your Withering Presence, but I think it'll be okay. Contagion got its quality changed as well, where currently it gives extra bonus damage for each time Contagion jumps, which is something that's also just built into the gem. Each time it jumps, it's a little bit of extra damage up to a cap. But at endgame, we don't care about this quality bonus because our Contagion is just barely doing any damage. In early game, it would be nice, but you don't have quality on your gem early game, so the new quality bonus makes the initial cast apply to some extra targets, which is honestly a buff. I think this one's going to be really nice. It may end up meaning we don't need to run Unleash in the Contagion anymore. We'll see. But yeah, that sounds good. Good change. Eldritch Empowerment got changed, which is one of the Lich nodes. It's the one right here that gets it, so you basically spend some of your ES on your spells, but you get extra damage. There's like a lot of wording changes on it where technically instead of being a extra ES cost, it's now going to sacrifice ES, and sacrificing ES doesn't interrupt your recharge. Essentially what it means is it's 5% of your ES sacrificed per cast now instead of 3% of a cost, which is a slight nerf, but it's not as much as it might seem because it's currently 3% ES cost, but the fact that it's a cost means it scales with like your cost multiplier. So like Contagion, for example, you would take that 3% and then multiply it by 1.5 and then multiply that by 1.3 with the current supports I have. So for Contagion, it would actually cost a little bit less because when it gets switched to a 5% sacrifice, that no longer scales with your costs. But I think in most cases, my spells average out to probably like 4% of my ES as a cost. So they'll be going from like 4% to 5%, which is a slight nerf, but honestly, it's not something that you even really notice while playing, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it. You cannot weapon swap Convalescence anymore or Blink. I didn't do weapon swap Convalescence on my specific setup, so if you were just using my setup, it doesn't affect you anyway. But if you were trying to do the weapon swap Convalescence and you had like some other spirit gem built in to take up the extra space, that is nerfed. Chaos Bolt, like I mentioned, can apply Wither. You can't swap Blink anymore. I did have a weapon swap Blink, but this one, I mean, I think I just would probably opt to just not even use Blink at that point. I don't think it's worth trying to fit probably into the main stuff. There was also Blink was mostly used to like get between packs. Hopefully Sprint can kind of fill in that gap. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, no more Blink. And then I have some unconfirmed support gem changes. This is pulled from, it was some sort of, I think, Chinese playtest event or something to that effect. Maybe Chinese journalists got to play a version. A bunch of gems got posted that are not necessarily final versions, but if we were to assume they are or are going to be very similar, just some things that we saw that were interesting. Execute rank 3 is pretty heavily buffed, or it's like, you know, it's the new version. There's like multiple tiers of some of the support gems. Current Execute we already are using in our Dark Effigy. It gives 50% more damage with hits against enemies on low life. I think they might have nerfed this to 40%, and then there's a rank 2 that does 50, or the rank 2 does 60 and the current one does 50. Either, but there's a tier 3 version, rank 3 version of Execute that only has 30% more damage against enemies on low life, but it also has you deal 30% more damage if you yourself are on low life, which we already do on this build, and that works out to like a decent sized buff to that one. So that'll be really big. It's only hit damage though, so it's not really helpful for like the essence drain. But for the Dark Effigy for single target, that'll just be a nice boost. And then Arcane Tempo, we'll have to see how this one works. Some of the wording in the leaked changes suggested that Arcane Tempo is going to be increased cast speed instead of more cast speed. But then the top rank 3 version was a smaller amount of cast speed. I think it was 10% or something. But it was 10% per spell you've cast recently. So I don't think placing an effigy totem counts. But so if you had this on here, and then you casted ED, you casted Contagion, you casted Despair, which you're always going to be kind of casting within 8 seconds, it would become 30% increased cast speed for your effigy pretty much. And then anytime you like maybe swapped to put down a sigil, you're going to get a temporary bigger bonus. And maybe you could have Chaos Bolt in your wand again to just trigger it. But it's going to be one to potentially consider as well. And then the other big changes is the fact that we can now use duplicates of supports. You can use magnified effect more than once, which you'll see it gets put in a lot of these gems now. But these are the just ones I could find off the top of my head, just going through the list of gems on the build and which ones we would use that maybe we get an extra copy of. Like on Sigil of Power, I currently didn't have any supports, just didn't really have space for it, but I've updated that. You could use Magnified Effect and Persistence, so your Sigil of Power is even bigger and it lasts even longer, which is great. Contagion, like I had mentioned earlier, maybe you don't need Unleash. If you don't need Unleash, you could put an extra Arcane Tempo in there so you cast your Contagion faster. That'll be nice. Withering Presence, you can just add Chaos Mastery, just +1 level to it. Doesn't really do a ton, but may as well. Despair, your Ground Effect Curse. You could, in theory, put Magnified Effect in. But in the current Despair, that would require having a 6 link on your curse, which a lot of people are not going to want. They did say they're lowering mana costs and stuff, but I had to de-level this Despair all the way down to level 11. I have a ton of plus levels on this build, so it gets another plus 11, so it ends up at 22. But Magnified Effect has a cost multiplier, so this one might have some issues with, you know, because of gem space or mana or whatever. But it is a possibility. And then Blasphemy, you can get Magnified Effect, so your temp chains is going to be not much, but it's going to be bigger. We have temp chains on Blasphemy. Which another thing to temp chains that I didn't mention in here, which is just kind of just, I guess, general 0.3 changes. They buffed a bunch of curses, but then made it so that curses have less effect on higher tier enemies. So basically on unique mobs, your curses work basically the same. And then anything below unique mobs, they work better. Like white mobs in particular, I think we're going to go from roughly 28% slow with our temp chains to like 55 or 56 or something. Like trash mobs are going to be extremely slowed down by the new temp chains boost. Yeah, that covers, I think, basically all the updates that I know for sure that'll affect it. Obviously, again, there's going to be tons of tree stuff that'll change, I'm sure. There's going to be other skill gem related stuff, lineage supports and all that we didn't even try to get into. But like, I'm not going to mess with any just theory crafting around that because there's just too much unknown. But I will really quickly just go over the build in general for people that are not familiar with the 0.2 version. It is a ED Contagion Lich at its core. I have some random gems in here that I was testing other stuff on. ED Contagion, and then you have Dark Effigy for a single target. So your clearest dots, your single target is actually hit damage. The way Dark Effigy works is it shoots at enemies based on how many Chaos dots you have on them, of which we end up with 4. Essence Drain gives a dot, Contagion gives a dot, Despair gives a dot thanks to Decaying Hex support, and then Dark Effigy itself gives a dot because we have it poisons enemies. You can't stack multiple poisons, you just use the one. It's possible that next patch maybe we'll have some sort of option somehow to get poisoned from a different source, and then we could free up the support gem for Dark Effigy. Remains to be seen. Other than that, Despair obviously still is just a Despair, and then we have Blasphemy for Temp Chains, Withering Presence, Convalescence gives us a ton of our ES sustain on demand. And then this Bone Storm is just here to make my character go down to low life when I need to. There's a whole stuff about that, but this isn't really part of the build. Don't really need to worry about it. And then we just have tons of ES. Lich gives basically a big chunk of mitigation when you go ES because your life cannot change. And then you get a bunch of sources of damage bypassing ES. You get 10% on your Ascendancy. I don't remember which node. One of these nodes out here has 5%. There it is, 5% bypass, and then your helmet has 10% bypass. So 25% damage bypasses your ES, but your life can't change. So that's just like 25% damage reduction. And then this node on Lich essentially provides you tons and tons of mana regen. The Jewel Socket one is just super flexible. You get a good jewel, you put it in there, and then Eldritch Empowerment just gives you damage. And on the tree itself, we just get whatever damage stuff we could, pretty much all the ES nodes we could, and then a bit of ES recharge, as well as a little bit spec'd into these totem nodes, mostly just for these totem life. It does give a bit of damage too, but the totems, even after they buffed totem defense, and even though I have a level 32 totem gem, it's still a bit tough to make your totems survive all the time when you're doing really juiced up content or like max difficulty bosses. It gets rough. But yeah. As far as leveling goes, so on your passives early on, again, the tree's going to change. But basically, I would say like you level with ED Contagion. Contagion does really well early, and then once you get Essence Drain, it's fantastic. You just do that the whole way through campaign. Early on, you're kind of just clicking like damage nodes, honestly, for pretty much all of Act 1. And probably just about all of Act 2, just getting whatever damage you can and like attribute nodes that you need to satisfy your attribute requirements. Like, I don't have these nodes anymore, but I think I had these early on. These Chaos over here. And again, there's going to be new nodes and stuff. And then, like, once you hit Act 3, you probably want to start looking into getting some ES nodes, because it's also you can start getting Ascendancy points, and you can get Soulless Form plus Eternal Life as your, like, first 2. It's not bad at all. Pretty good way to do it. And you'll just get some defense, and you'll have basically endless mana regen. Very nice for campaign. As far as your gems go, so like you get Contagion, you get ED pretty quickly, and honestly, once you have those, it's almost all you need. Like, even on boss damage, you can kind of get away with just spamming Essence Drain. On bosses, it might be a good idea to like do a mule of a second character to get Ellie spells though, because you might want a little bit extra. We used to use Frost Bomb, but it got nerfed really hard. I don't think I would bother with it. Maybe get a Spark and a Flame Wall, and then you could at least have that for before getting Essence Drain, and maybe use the Flame Wall with your Essence Drain. You can also maybe use Bone Cage for single target. It's like okay, or it used to be. I'll have to look into that one. But once you get to the tier 5 gems, which I believe is level 14, you grab Bone Storm, and Bone Storm does very solid single target for a while. And then your build is basically ED Contagion, clear, Bone Storm, single target. You can even grab Detonate Dead. It's okay, but probably not super necessary. And then eventually you get down here and you get Dark Effigy. And once you have Dark Effigy, you're pretty much got your whole build. You're also going to get Despair. So now you have your ED Contagion, Effigy, Despair. You're good to go. And that's just going to cruise you through the rest of the campaign. As far as gearing goes, like, you want ES bases even from pretty early on, because you're going to start getting some ES nodes, presumably, unless they're nuked out of existence. from pretty early on. But at the same time, life isn't bad, especially well, early life is obviously very good, but even once you're like heavy ES, um, life gives you some mana regen because of how Lich works. Once you get the Atziri helmet, life gives you a little bit of ES. But for the most part, you're looking for ES everywhere, you know, and then just like resists and cast speed and plus gem levels and all that. And yeah, that's kind of the build. That's everything, I think. Updated. I will have this POB posted, which again, it's mostly just a snapshot import of my character with some like notes and slight updates. If there's like significant news that changes things, I'll try to get stuff updated. I mean, there might even need to be like a second follow-up video, but as of right now, that's as much as we can kind of plan realistically. And just wanted to get that shared. So hopefully the video is helpful. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for watching. See you.